was.
It might be Can You Hear Me Running?
Oh,
Silent
yeah.
running, brackets on dangerous ground.
Oh, you've hit
It's like the way Morgan says it might be, and then produces the entire lyric.
It might be that. I've no idea, really.
Stay up tonight and turn into the night. Something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, I had it on the Rock City Nights compilation on cassette.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of an atmospheric kind of...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Brooding.
Yeah, I've not heard that for ages. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Welcome to Hark, the 87th Precinct podcast.
Can you hear
join us
me
in the midst
running?
of a Mike and the Mechanics... well, I'd call it a sing-along, but I think it's just Steve-O's... It's in his heart.
It is, yeah. The heart of Paul Carrick.
Which you're borrowing for this week's episode.
am. So I'm going to review this particular book from the opinion of Paul Carrick.
Excellent. Well, we'll try and keep that in mind.
Got me beanie on.
Nice.
Well, there you go. That's one of the more unusual starts, but, that's what happens. We are looking at Ladykiller by Ed Mcbain. Not, as I said on the last podcast, Killer's Wedge, which is the next book in the series. I got excited because I really like Killer's Wedge, and it's one that sticks out in my mind quite a lot. But I also like this book, and it's Ladykiller, so... Sorry for getting the order wrong, which I should not have done given the amount of time I've spent organising the books and also sorting out the website and blog and stuff. We think it may be because the Orion edition of the books has the order published wrong in them, but I've checked, and this is the right one, Ladykiller.
Indeed it is.
From 1958. So, I'll do a little bit of a 1958 extra detail, because it's always nice to sort of put the context around these things. So let's have a look at what do we think was sort of number one in the charts in the UK and America about 1958. We're talking August 58, if that helps.
I'll leave that to Morgan.
I don't know, was rock and roll still reigning, or was it starting to, the first wave starting to fade a little? I don't know.
I think it probably was fading a little by this point, given the things that are in the charts. Although I think it's a bit of a myth that it just went sort of crooners, rock and roll.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think there's a lot more crossover with these things than people think.
Oh, I don't know. Connie Francis.
Probably in there somewhere. I haven't got all the information. In the UK, the week that certainly the book was registered, the number one tune was When by the Carlin Twins, or Kalin Twins, Kalin.
Oh, nice. That's
just one
famous toe tapper.
If you've never heard it, it's one that just goes dum bum ba da 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 dum bum bum ba da 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 dum dum, like lots and lots of songs at the time did.
Standard 4-chord trick.
Except that it's got the feature of they click their fingers really loudly all the way through it.
Ooh.
In America, however, the number one spot was held by Ricky Nelson with Poor Little Fool.
Oh, very good.
And that was just ahead of Nel Blu di Pinto di Blu by Domenico Modugno. And I'm sure I pronounced that perfectly. Perfect in Italian pronunciation there. But it is better known as Volare. Which made more famous by Dean Martin,
naturally, yeah.
Volare, oh, etc. Movies-wise, Gigi won the Best Picture Oscar that year. But I think one of the standout films from America that year is The Fly.
Ooh.
The original version of The Fly.
Vincent Price.
However, in the UK, we have two very significant films from 1958. Ones that...
Frankenstein's Monster.
Nearly.
Because Frankenstein.
Stop saying Frankenstein, but follow that train of thought.
Dracula.
Dracula, yes. The first of the Hammer horror Draculas is out in 1958.
Because Frankenstein must be 59 then.
59, yeah, it's
they're
close.
almost immediately.
I think they were producing a couple a year at that point, Hammer, for those series of things. But also, the first film in a very famous series of films was released that year.
Carry On.
Yeah.
Carry On Sergeant, is it?
That's exactly it.
Oh, very good.
Featuring William Hartnell, 5 years before he becomes Doctor Who, in his role as the cross sergeant of the title.
Does that feature Kenneth Connor before he did Inspector Morse?
Kenneth Connor did Inspector Morse?
Well, we were talking about that a few weeks ago, how Kenneth Connor Inspector Morse.
Oh yes, we were discussing the who would you cast as alternative
Bernard
detective.
Bresslaw as
On about this.
Bernard Bresslaw stars as
Poirot.
We're off to a flying start this time, aren't we?
I've totally forgotten we'd had this stupid
You look at me so blankly. Kenneth Connor was...
Well, you don't necessarily expect it. It doesn't come up on a day-to-day level.
Yeah, Kenneth Williams is Bannercheck.
Yeah, Jim Dale as Ironside.
Oh, God.
You could just do this for hours.
You could,
have
yeah.
your own podcast series where you recast every famous detective as a member of the Carry On team.
Yeah.
Joan Sims as Miss Marple. That's actually probably quite a nice idea.
Yeah, could work.
Anyway, yes, Carry On Sergeant, first of the Carry On films, which still, it's not a bad film actually, it's more like an Ealing comedy than it is a sort of farce.
Rather less saucy than some of the later instalments, as I recall.
The early ones are all right, aren't they? They just
Yeah.
get progressively worse, to be
Is
honest.
Bob
don't they?
Monkhouse in that one? I think he might be. Anyway, politically speaking, Eisenhower was president, Macmillan was prime minister. Steve-O might know this, I'm not suggesting Morgan won't, but I know Steve-O does love his infrastructure. What was the big infrastructure thing that Macmillan was involved in 1958?
1958, the first motorway in England, the Preston Bypass.
Absolutely, yes.
That's amazing.
That's what happened in the month that this book was published. The
There's
first
a-
stretch of
there's-
motorway was opened in the
There's a
UK.
big plaque in the roundabout by the Tickle Trout at near Samlesbury, Blackburn.
That's the level of detail that people come to this podcast for. There'll be people
Did I
in...
say Tickle
in-
Trout, not Pickle Trout? Yeah,
Pickle trout.
Well, the M1 was the first motorway, but the first bit of motorway was the Preston Bypass.
So 8 or 9 miles of it up in Preston. So, there we go. That's the context you need when you're reading this book. You need to know that Volare was in the charts, Carry On Sergeant had come out, and that there was 8 miles of motorway in the UK.
And Kenneth Connor was Inspector Morse.
Kenneth Connor was rehearsing to be Inspector Morse.
Lewis, Nicky Ticker.
Oh, let's not get it into the hello impression. Oh, God. We haven't watched the 87 Precinct TV adaptation of this, although there was one. This is one of the ones that has been adapted for it.
All right.
We'll watch it at some point for our entertainment purposes. It's, as I recall, not bad. But let's get straight into the book now. Okay. This book opens with a fantastic first line. It's in italics. It stands out on its own. It's got 4 question marks behind it. And it was, were you a crank this week? That's a good question to open a book with.
It certainly
I
is.
think. Were either of you cranks this week?
I'm generally a crank at least once or twice a
I'm
day.
sure I
think.
was, yeah.
I think I've probably been quite cranky, possibly even...
It's a fairly cranky first page, isn't it, really? It's,
As these things go, yeah, it doesn't really do what you expect the opening of an 87th Precinct novel to do. Yeah, it's quite cranky.
but it's setting you up for what's to unfold
Definitely.
over the next chapters.
Basically, he's talking about the notion of a crank, the people who would just waste the police's time, basically, and he suggests that people who ring up and say that there are suspected communists, kidnappers, murderers, abortionists, forgers, and high-class whorehouses. People who complain about television comedians, mice, landlords, loud phonographs, strange ticking sounds in the walls, and all that sort of stuff. And he does ask again, were you a crank this week? And then he states that it was Wednesday, 24th of July. I think he's writing this, it's published in 1958. If we were going to be particularly, accurate about this, Wednesday, 24th of July would set it in 1957. Should you care to know, I did check. That was a Wednesday. And what I like about this book, before we even get into the plot of it, is it takes place on that one day. And not even, in fact, the entire length of the day. Basically, a little over 12 hours basically takes place, this story.
It sets up a countdown early on, and then the entire book is just counting down those minutes, isn't it? Which is...
Yeah, it's very, very specific as well with
Yeah.
it. I noted them down.
Which is exactly the same as the subsequent book as well, actually, because that's all set on one day as well. That's quite interesting.
Well, it's sort of turning the magnifying glass onto the precinct even more, I think, isn't it? Rather than sort of big picture police work which is graphed and takes place over a number of days or weeks or whatever. This is literally, if you have an extreme situation, the urgency, and how the machinery goes into operation to try and solve the crime or prevent the crime.
It's interesting, really, at this stage of the series where a lot of writers would probably have just gone, oh, well, this exact formula works, let's just churn out more variations on exactly the same formula. He's very much actually playing with it, and every novel at this stage takes quite a different shape, doesn't it? Like, so there'll be some that really expand out and explore lots of different characters over a long period of time, and some that really focus in. And so it makes it really kind of pretty engrossing, because every time you get something totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. And so by this point, you can't really take it for granted. He's set up enough things that you want to come back and read the next one. But like you say, as he moves along with the series, he's actually bringing in new elements to it. And so we have this little bottle episode, as it were. It's a little self-contained thing. But
whilst this is all in one day, it's all throughout the city, though, isn't it? It's absolutely all the four corners.
Yeah, it covers the whole city, but always with this ever-present clock just ticking down towards this inevitable conclusion, whatever that may be.
In comparison to the next book, all in the same period of time, but all in one location.
Yeah, yes, it's even finer in. The zoom is getting closer.
Proper kind of chamber piece, but beautifully done, as we'll see.
Yes, as we will see before too long. This first chapter has great lines in it, such as, surlily, Dave Murchison tugged at his underwear. I like that because I like the word surlily, because I would never have thought that was actually a word. I would thought you'd have had to say, Dave Murchison tugged at his underwear in a surly manner.
But no.
And I think that might have been the first time I've ever said the word surlily out loud. And it feels very strange coming off the tongue.
It has a pleasant ring to it, though.
It does.
It works for me.
Yes, especially in the context of a desk sergeant who's too hot in his underwear.
Indeed.
And on the next page, he tugs at his undershorts sourly. There's many ways you can tug at your undershorts.
Are we divulging what the urgency is in the plan?
Well, go for it.
Don't think that would be... Since it basically tells you on the front cover of my edition, I think we can probably divulge that.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. Well, it's a note that's handed to the desk sergeant by a small child.
Yeah, and it closes the first chapter, doesn't it?
It does, indeed, with almost a photostat. I will kill the lady tonight at 8. What can you do about it? ?
And I love the way that ends, because the chapter literally ends with that image of the note that's been handed in. So this kid's passed a note into the desk sergeant and buggered off straight away.
So that's kind of following on from the "Are you a crank?"
Yeah.
And then there's some debate about whether this person's a crank. They're not really sure, but they won't take the risk.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the novel plays out of them assuming that it's genuine, and
we
trying
see
to track down the sender of the note.
Yeah, we see something about the character of Lieutenant Burns in that he can't take the risk. And they're also... So, like you say, the second chapter is literally them sitting around deciding what to do. And in the timeline, that takes them an hour and a quarter. So that's an hour and a quarter they've lost from 7:45 in the morning, when this story starts, when the letter is handed in, and 8 o'clock being their deadline, as the note says. So they lose an hour and a quarter deciding what to do.
And it's a good... I think more so than some of the recent books that we've read have definitely centred more on one, maybe two detectives. This one's a proper team job.
Yeah, real ensemble piece, isn't it?
I think, Hawes does most of the running around.
Yes, he does, actually.
I think you get most of the other ones in there for...
Yeah,
you do get a good feel for the squad, don't you, which is great.
And he meets Christine Maxwell, doesn't he, in this, which I am sure...
I'm sure the future will...
I think she features again.
Although not in the next book, funnily enough.
No.
But like we say, that's another small universe one.
Indeed.
Anyway, what I would like to say about Chapter 2, before we get any further into the actual book, is this is my true crime moment, okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm channeling another podcast. There's a fantastic podcast called Wine and Crime, which 3 folks in America do. And it's a true crime podcast where they, as we drink beer and read Ed Mcbain, they talk about true crime stories and drink wine, hence the name Wine and Crime.
Sounds like a tremendous idea.
Yes, we don't really talk about our beer, but they definitely talk about the wine. So I made a point. I knew I needed to do some true crime research because of this story. So I got myself a bottle of wine. So this is my wine and crime tribute moment here, in that I drank, not all in one go, it must be said, although I normally would, a bottle of Prestige de Calvé, Côte de Rhône 2016 red wine. And I don't normally go for French red wine. I normally drink Spanish wine, if I have wine at all, which I haven't been having much of recently. But I bought it for the very complicated and posh reason of it had a funny shaped bottle.
Well,
It's not quite round.
connoisseurs that we are, that's a very valid reason.
Well, there's at least me and you here, Morgan, who at some point in our post-student days, the wine that we drank was the one that basically had the smallest label and just said the word wine on it and cost the least money.
How big's the bump in the bottom?
It's fairly shallow, actually.
Yeah.
It's a funny shaped bottle, but it was very nice, actually. It was a very nice bottle of wine, and it says things in French on the back, so you know it's all right.
Well, indeed, yeah. Nice young fruity French red.
Delightful.
Delightful.
It was definitely different to a...
Does that sound like any what we're talking about then?
Wine. So I did drink wine. I felt, because I was doing some research into true crime, which we don't really look at, I'm a big fan of not true crime. But in chapter 2, Corella mentions... I will get the wording right for you here before I say it.
Revelation, this.
They're talking about why this person's handed in the note, and someone says perhaps he wants to get caught. In fact, it's Hawes says it. Like this Hirons kid in Chicago a few years back. Sure, the lipstick on the mirror, catch me before I kill again, Corella says. So, they refer to the lipstick killer, which is the name given to the case of William Hirons, who was arrested in 1946 for the crime of killing 3 people, 2 women and a little girl. Josephine Ross, Frances Brown and Suzanne Degnan. This is in Chicago, as we suggest. So the first victim, Josephine Ross, was stabbed. The second, Frances Brown, was knifed in the neck and shot in the head. And the little girl, this is a horrible story, was snatched from a house. They later found her head in a storm sewer, and the rest of her body had been dissected and distributed around the place. So horrible thing. But during the second killing, the reason that this became really popular with the press was there was a message left in the victim's apartment on the wall written in lipstick that said, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." And this is clearly where some of the psychological backstory for inspiration for this Ladykiller book has come from. Maybe one day Wine and Crime will do this as a subject because there's so much information here. Basically, the police questioned so many people, hundreds and hundreds of people, and kept to keep letting them go. They started thinking that the killer was a woman at one point. They thought that the little girl being snatched was to do with the Office of Price Administration meatpackers strike. All sorts of
Obvious
weird things like
conclusion
that.
to draw, really, yeah.
Later on, they arrested this guy, William Hirons, who was only 17. He was arrested for attempted burglary elsewhere. And now, you shouldn't find the real world quite this funny, especially given the horrible murders involved in this story. But the way they caught him was the janitor of the place he tried to rob chased him out, and the police were there. And he was rendered unconscious by an off-duty policeman who dropped 3 clay flower pots on his head from the top of the stairs. Which is just like it would, like something out of, I don't know.
Carry on, Sergeant.
Carry on, yeah, or Carry On Constable from a few years later.
Indeed, yeah.
Literally 3 clay flower pots, like in a cartoon.
So how did they link him to the murders?
Oh, well, via a series of very circumstantial evidence, and also his confession.
Some Roger Haviland style beating the snot out of him back at the squad room?
Well, yes, quite likely. He was questioned for 6 days. He was beaten. He was given sodium pentothal without a warrant.
So do they think it's an unreliable conviction then?
Yeah, well, basically when he was under the truth serum, he claimed to have a second personality called George, who committed murders, but it's likely by that point he would have said anything, and the drugs probably made him say stuff. He was also given... this is what I don't understand. Later, he was given a lumbar puncture without anaesthesia before the police attempted a polygraph. Why did they give him a lumbar puncture? I don't know. Did they...
Just for a laugh?
Just, like, stick... I don't know. Do they anaesthetise people before polygraphs? I don't know. He said that this character, George, his second personality, his surname was Merman, And the press got hold of this and thought he said murder man. So it was all the elements were there for a press story. There was the lipstick. There was these various bits of evidence. A thumbprint on a door frame and a ransom note and the knife and this, that, and the other. And he basically confessed. He confessed again, but probably because his defence were telling him, if you confess now, they'll only charge you for one of the murders rather than all three. They didn't. He got basically full life sentence. And more or less immediately after that, he basically went, I just confessed. I didn't do it. And he probably didn't, but I can't say. But he spent the rest of his life in prison until he died in 2012. So he basically was in prison between 1946 and 2012. But while he was there, he became the first prisoner in Illinois to earn a college degree whilst in prison. He did languages, analytical geometry, data processing and tailoring, but he was forbidden by the authorities to study physics, chemistry or celestial navigation. What's he going to do from Illinois in a prison cell? Oh, build a spaceship. Anyway. So yeah, he was given a lot of responsibility and he was clearly an intelligent chap. So that's basically the influence here. And that is my wine and crime, true crime research.
Fantastic. Well, that's shed a lot of light on that. I kind of passed over that detail without even really giving it a second thought, to be honest. But,
same here.
Well, I thought I'd check because it seemed like a bit of a strange reference when I was reading it through again. I think I hadn't noticed it before, but then it's like, oh yeah, the lipstick on the mirror. And there's actually, I think throughout this book, there's he's very good at sewing a few little things that you just take for granted as part of, the nature, the slice of life type way people talk, this, that and the other, the way they act. Such as, I don't know, I've just put all my pieces of paper out of arm's reach, like an idiot. Is references to cough drops throughout. Myers taking cough drops.
Smith's cough drops.
Indeed. There's not masses of illustrations in here, but there is one important series of illustrations in here, which is the police artist's rendering of the suspect who had handed the note to the kid and later assaulted Cotton Hawes when he tries to catch him in the park. We'll actually get to that in a little bit because that's quite interesting how they set that up. So what do we think of the drawing style of the police artist as rendered in this book?
Yeah, they're pretty interesting, actually. It's an amazingly lopsided face. I quite like it. But, I was... there must be... Let me see how many. 1, 2, 3, 4... There's about 5 attempts, isn't there? It's quite a good scene with the police artist who's getting frustrated because he's got Cotton Hawes and the child both giving him conflicting information.
Indeed. It's one bit of police sort of documentation they've not looked at before in the series, so it's interesting to see.
Yeah, it's not photo fit, it's police art.
Yeah, it's little line drawings, but ultimately there's one distinctive feature that changes with this, which perhaps I won't mention, but the face is definitely similar in my mind to that of Evan Hunter, Ed McBain himself.
You reckon?
It looks very similar. I think he does.
Well, it's not a million miles away, although his face is slightly less wiggly around the edges. He's got a very thick neck, the character in this illustration.
He has indeed.
But that's what they say. Say that's the guy. So we've got our situation. They've got to catch someone before they kill someone at 8 o'clock that night. We've had
Assuming they're not a crank.
Assuming they're not a crank. We've come to the situation where they know that this person actually exists because a sequence set in the squad room where they're having lunch is very interesting given the supposed military background of all of these policemen, these detectives, is they notice light reflecting off binoculars or field glasses, and that's how they figure out that they're being watched from the park, and they take a chance and say it's probably someone to do with this. And I was thinking, it's just really strange that they would notice that even on a bright day. But they have all been, at this stage in the way their characters are told, they've been in the Navy or the Army, and they've all seen service. And so actually the idea of someone hiding with field glasses and all that sort of stuff, they might be sensitive to it. It might be a thing that they know and understand.
Definitely, at least a couple of them like fairly fresh from the Korean War, aren't they? So that'll probably be very much in their mind still.
But that does lead to them getting hold of these field glasses after the incident with Cotton Hawes and the suspect in the park. And they have to go around the pawn shops to see if they can find these out.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just this wonderful sequence where they get into the second of the shops and they meet the two brothers that run this shop, who are
totally insane.
Absolutely bonkers. Jason and Jacob Bloom. "I'm Jason Bloom," the first said. "I'm Jacob Bloom," echoed the other. And they basically just are mad as a hedgehog. And they just keep bursting out laughing. It must have been the most I think he's put this in to try and just think, imagine being these cops on this schedule and you come across these two jokers who just can't basically say anything simply. They can't help themselves from laughing and sharing their own joke. It's a great sequence, and I would like a whole spin-off series featuring Jason and Jacob Bloom annoying people everywhere they go.
That would be good.
It is very strange. Jacob burst out laughing again, and by the point that you're reading it in the book, you're going, "Oh, stop it! You're running out of time!"
It's not even that funny what they're laughing about either when they eventually tell her...
he was eating a lollipop.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hysterical, isn't it, apparently?
Yeah. A man eating a lollipop! That's how I imagine they laughed, possibly.
Oh, possibly like that.
Possibly like a tiny witch. But actually what he does do is, because they're around and about all around the city trying to find... It populates it with quite a few interesting characters.
Absolutely.
Not least Lady J. Astor, who is a musician or a singer known for her ribald satirical songs.
Oh, indeed.
Because she's called the Lady, or Lady J, they go and see if she is the lady, the intended victim. And so Cotton Hawes turns up to see her, and in a remarkable turn of events, doesn't sleep with her, even though she asks him to. So you can tell that, he's changing as a character. But she does go on about these songs that she's doing.
Yeah, she's a bit...
What was the line you found for her, Steve-O?
Well, it's got a good description. Her teeth revealed by her smile were rather large, giving her the appearance of a benevolent horse.
So possibly not to Cotton Hawes' taste.
Maybe not.
You go on to find out that the album that she's released is called Astor's Pet Horse. So it's all rather peculiar, really.
It really is, yeah.
But she's got a few cranks who were
offended
her. So she's a definite possibility.
Indeed, her material is rather risque.
And again, she's another one who slows the investigation down, because he's trying to work out what's going on, perhaps put a police protection, sort out a guard for her.
And she's just a bit bored in the afternoon.
Yeah, she's bored. Do you want to listen to me record? I've just made this record of cowboy songs, but about the city. The satirical edge creeping into stuff. So she makes him sit down and listen to a load of these cowboy songs, which is just insane. Yeah. So it does Home on the she does Home on the Range.
Indeed.
With shall we sing it? I'm gonna sing it.
Go for it.
Home, home in the slums, full of pushers and junkies and bums, where seldom is heard mating call of the bird, and the zip guns play music like drums. There we go. Lucky that's out of copyright.
From the way it's written, I think the record is probably about as impressive as that sounded.
Yeah. Someone could remix that and put a donk on it, I believe the kids are saying these days.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, these days.
So that's probably what she would be doing if it was
set
now.
Put a what on it?
A donk.
A donk. Put a donk on it.
Definitely a phrase that is at least 15 years out of date.
So in my mind, seems very current.
Yeah. Well, now that I'm no longer a teacher with a load of teenagers to embarrass by saying things like that, I just say it out loud and sound like a mad old crank. So, anyway, she's a good character in there as well. And
the guy who buys the binoculars is quite amusing. Taking his mum to the theatre.
Oh no, that's not the binoculars guy. That's the guy who buys the paper from the shop, isn't it? So they're trying to trace the person who bought the...
Oh, is that the paper guy? What's the binocular guy? The binocular guy's a bit peculiar.
Binocular guy, is Binocular guy the one who...
He's like on the boat ride, I think, with a girl, and he loses them.
Oh,
the binoculars
that's right,
in a particular pub called
Indeed.
The Pub.
Which actually leads them closer than they realise to where they need to be.
Yeah. But they put a tail on him, and the person they put on the tail of this guy is Detective Bob O'Brien.
Oh, yeah.
Who basically gets a couple of little moments where he rings up and is like, am I still following this guy around? And they're like, yes. Oh, poor old Bob.
Poor old Bob. He has it tough.
He does. At least he doesn't get assaulted or shot in this one.
Once, yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, lots of strange things. But, yeah, the guy who bought the paper from the bookshop.
Oh, yeah.
It's all this, the amount of... This is the only thing that I found curious is, in the time that they've got, the things that they do, I don't know in reality that could ever have worked. But, it's fiction. And it's very compelling and it drives you along.
There's quite a few of them doing it, though, isn't there?
I do wonder, because Cotton Hawes does get to quite a few places. Like, he has to go and visit Fats Donner in a steam room at the start of it.
That's true.
And then within 20 minutes of that, they've gone to Via de Putas to speak to the
other
madams.
lady.
Yeah, the other lady. Who's another good character.
The Italian heiress.
Yeah.
Who...
It turns out she's from like Chicago or
Yeah,
somewhere daft like that.
Yeah. She's from Scranton, isn't she?
Oh, Scranton, yeah.
Quite interesting, actually, in the Via de Putas with one of the few times you see Steve Carella, his attitude towards sort of the pragmatic side of enforcing the law. Because I think Cotton's a bit shocked that he's not just enforcing all of the law exactly to the word, and you kind of see a bit more of him kind of, I don't know, taking a more practical approach, and he has sympathy with the people, like the sex workers. He actually understands that that's a thing that's going to happen anyway, so he'd rather keep people safe and just have that happening safely.
And he uses that to diffuse a situation with a punter who's refusing to pay for the services he's received, and rather than put all the mechanism of the law into force there, which would take them off the case they're actually on, and two, would make the situation in policing that probably harder for them later in the rest of their working lives and for the patrolmen there. But you're right, it's a point where Cotton Hawes is shocked by what appears to be Steve Carella's laxity towards the law, and he sort of has a go at him.
He does.
And Carella gives him one of those great lines like, "I've never taken any money in my life." And it's like, "I know you haven't, Steve, because you're my hero."
We believe you, Steve.
But you leave the prostitutes to get on with it.
Yeah. So it's nice. I quite like that sort of. He's not being depicted as this absolutely to the letter kind of like shining white knight, but he's still a really good cop. He just like has a realistic attitude to how these things can be handled. He's being
pragmatic about these things,
and also understands like it's not just criminals and crime; they're human beings and acts accordingly, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a place that they visit quite a lot during the 87th Precinct stories, the Via de Putas. And it's another place where you see the social changes of the city take place, because it starts out very much sort of Puerto Rican and things like that, and it changes over the years to show different ethnic groups moving, which reflects the real New York, which is sort of fictionalizing here. Well, so it's an very interesting place. It's not just a place for him to stick a load of comedy madams and prostitutes.
Definitely,
and things like
that. It actually generally, although there are comic moments and also kind of fairly serious and shocking moments that occur there, he's pretty sympathetic and in the way he always depicts characters in those situations as well. I think McBain, which speaks highly of him, because there are definitely crime writers who would just totally exploit that kind of setting for
sensationalism
absolutely, just turn it into some kind of like bawdy nonsense, which Ed Mcbain mercifully is somewhat above.
Yeah, it actually gives most of the little dirty sex games to the cops, or certainly to Cotton Hawes.
Indeed, that's what he's there for.
So far, anyway. But yeah, there's lots of stuff going on in this short period of time, and it goes very fast. I genuinely don't know whether they could do all the lab reporting and analysis that they say they do in 1957 in that time. But I don't know. I wasn't analysing fingerprints on or paper watermarks in 1958.
I think your scepticism is probably well founded, but it does. The book kind of carries you along in a little rush. I don't think you really worry about it too much while it's happening.
No,
it's just obviously everyone working on the case knows everything's time critical, so maybe they just really kind of pulled something unusual out of the hat for this particular day. I don't know.
Which is why the stumbling blocks are so sort of intriguingly frustrating.
I think the biggest stumbling block is the fact that none of the squad have got anything better to do than chase something around that may not actually be genuine. I think that's the biggest leap of faith you have to have.
Because you don't see him bringing other people, do you?
Improbable, does that the entire squad...
Well, there must be other members of the squad who don't appear here who are working on other things. I'm sure...
Well, there's a suggestion of shift work in this because Bert Kling's on a different shift.
Well, he always goes on about the shifts, doesn't he? So are they on?
There's like 6 on and there's 6 off, and there's and there's a rotate.
So 4 of the 6 are all. Anyway,
So if you think about it too hard, you go absolutely mad. But an actual roadblock in their progress is like they're getting there and they're still trying to figure it all out, and suddenly a late chapter in the book, chapter 12. Everything just happens in the station house. So suddenly the rest of the police business intrudes in a really dense and violent way because basically a bunch of people are brought in who've been arrested doing other things. The kid's mum turns up and she's a character.
Oh, she is.
And that distracts a lot of the detectives.
Indeed, the people bleeding all over the place. Ooh, it's not nice.
In fact, there's some more police brutality in here as well. I think, is it Maya punches someone?
Quite out of character for him, really, but I think he might do.
It's a very hot day, though, isn't it?
It is.
So,
I think...
Frayed tempers,
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's lots of people, when someone's trying to be a smart arse and so someone just punches him in the face, sort of thing. We've all done it. We haven't done it. It's interesting, and then that sort of all happens in this really intense burst, and then they come out the other side, and it's like, oh, now what? And then they have a couple of hours left, and the clock keeps ticking and ticking and ticking, and in fact the clock ticks down till the actual moment, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
So.
Dot.
Yeah, dot.
Indeed. Is it Maya who punched him? I've definitely just found Hawes giving him a good couple of digs.
Well, it might not be Maya. I might have made that up.
Lunged at Hawes, fist swinging wildly.
That happens. Yeah, that does
it
happen.
Not Willis, maybe? Willis is in this one quite a bit.
Maybe everyone has a go at him.
Yeah, maybe they just have just punching people in the face left, right, and centre. I will find it now.
Pete Burns is in this. Features quite a bit for Pete Burns as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, because he's doing the organising of it. Because I like the fact that at the start of the book he contacts Captain Frick, who's in charge of the patrolman. It just seems like the most ineffective man in all the books he's in. He's just sort of slightly daft and not quick enough.
Always reminds me of Wamba. What's the choir boys?
Yes, and
what's his name? The author,
Joseph Wamba.
Joseph Wamba. Yeah. And like in that, there's Commander Moss, who's this totally incompetent Jobsworth.
Yeah,
and they're very, very similar characters. I think
it seems to be
just like this. Yeah.
Someone who's risen through the ranks without ever really getting their hands dirty and it's like far removed from the actual business of police work.
Yeah. I've only ever read The Choir Boys once, but I read it after starting to read these. I distinctly remember it reminding him, that Commander Moss reminded me of.
I've only read it once too, but a book that I suspect would definitely
Have been influenced by these.
Well, yeah, but also certainly worth another read, I'd guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, I also have only read it once, and it is. I remember it being fantastic,
Yeah,
very enjoyable,
tremendous, along with the New Centurions and the Blue Knight. I think
very good,
and in
good book.
all tremendous.
Maybe a slightly more, I don't know whether more serious, but certainly perhaps more graphic than the 87th, but still include the certain absurdity of what one can get up to in a shift in these.
If anything, like definitely there's got to be an influence there, but more about police than about crime. If anything,
Yeah,
the crime's sort of incidental to the stories about the policemen.
yeah, you're not really interested in what they're investigating because you're kind of more interested in what the hell these lunatics who are the policemen.
Yeah,
You know.
it's a.
Anyway, I digress. But,
You digress, but it's
yeah,
a worthwhile
certain-
digression. And if you
yeah.
want to digress from Ed McBain to Joseph Wamber, that's a good way to go.
It makes sense.
I've found what I was looking for.
Yep.
Willis brings in someone and he hands him over to Maya, and this guy says, "Come on, Maya," Gallagher said, "be a I was going to say be a sport."
Oh yeah.
And Maya slapped him across the face. "Don't talk to me, big man. Don't use my name or I'll ram it down your throat." Which is unlike Maya, because he's normally just there for the quips and the asides
Absolutely.
and this, that, and
he's
the other.
pretty easygoing with the kind of Lasonic Jewish humour, isn't he? Generally, famed for his patience, as we know.
Yes, so that's a him to explode like that and hit someone is an indication of the stresses that they're under.
Indeed, yeah.
So there's a couple of bits of Deus Ex Machina, which I think is how you say it, that help them get
It's
there.
Latin. You can pronounce it
Yeah.
however you want.
All the Latins are dead, aren't they?
Aye, they're not going to complain.
Yeah. By which we mean ancient Romans, not people in Latin countries. But there are a couple of little things, and one of which is they take
See our listeners in Buenos Aires.
turning off in their droves. But all the ones in 50 BC in the occupied Gaul are switching on. So, yeah, there's a couple of things. The note that is handed in is made up of stuff cut out of newspapers and magazines and things like that. And I thought I'd have a little look because they take it apart and they say some of it's from the New York Times. So, again, New York actually exists and you can get the newspaper from there in this city. But the number 8 in the I Will Kill the Lady Tonight at 8 is taken from a Ballantine beer logo.
Yeah.
And I was trying to work out what it was, and I found a picture of it. And it's actually a series of 3 rings that has been sliced. So I don't know if you've seen those Ballantine beer there, boys.
yes,
I'll put that
I
on
think
the
I have before, actually.
I'll put that on the blog and on
That's
Twitter.
the one clue they kind of miss, isn't it, really? Because that becomes critical.
Because that makes
They only really get onto that after the fact, really.
Yeah.
that's giving them the hint about the location for the.
But one of the things I like, not just in this, but like all the 87 precincts, thinking about it, he gives as much gusto to the dead ends as he does.
Oh,
the
yeah,
genuine plot
absolutely.
lines. So you've absolutely no idea which one at the end is going to actually come out to be the one that they were kind of on the right track.
It has great fun steering you down the dead ends, which makes it a lot more satisfying as a read, because you do read some crime novels.
And you know full
just
well when
know.
you're like, yeah.
Also, I should say, for any listeners who are not familiar with the Ballantines logo, it looks a bit like the John Bonham logo from Led Zeppelin 4, just tilted over on its side a bit.
Ah, it does
3
actually.
intertwined circles.
Yeah.
Or the Olympics, if there's only 3 continents.
Yeah,
Post ocean levels rising Olympics, possibly.
1984 Olympics.
But yeah, that's interesting because obviously they have to reproduce that in the book and stuff like that. They also talk about a book called The Lady is snipped from an advert for a book called The Lady by Conrad Richter, who I had never heard of but was actually an author and quite a famous American one at the time. The Lady is apparently a superb story of the Old Southwest by one of America's most distinguished novelists.
Superb.
Another little bit of my American accents there for you. And also there's reference to Smith Brothers cough drops, which produce a trigger. So they talk about Maya having these cough drops over the course of this book, and then suddenly the image on the front of it triggers something, as well as the name Smith, because Smith's used as a pseudonym, as it so often is, but also the cover of the Smith Brothers cough drops famously had these two images of the brothers who have these insane beards, one that looks like a beard of bees and one that's like a chin strap. And so I was pleased to see actual images of that as well.
Excellent.
So these are real world things in here too. So I think we need to be doing some sort of summing up really with this.
Yes.
Unless you have anything particular, gentlemen.
Not really. I suppose my summing up, we will talk in great detail in future podcasts about the Deaf Man. But I was mentioning to you, Paul, the other day that it seems a bit like a proto-Deaf
It's
Man.
a little bit of a foreshadowing of those kind of stories, isn't it?
Yeah,
Definitely,
the kind of crimes. The crime has only exist. Well, I suppose you can say that about all crime, but I suppose this crime's only existing because one person's choosing to drag the police into it.
Yeah, it's like and the criminal taunting the police
Crimes
as well.
for crime's sake, kind of thing. And whilst he's got a bit of a motive, well, he's got a big motive, but he kind of obviously sees playing around with the police kind of as important as that, and that shares a similar plot device to quite a few of the later books. So that's like an impression I definitely had about this.
Yeah,
And
Because he doesn't fully follow up on the idea of it being a psychological issue that someone's had. You
doesn't
like
really-
the lipstick killer.
no, it's
It is
just
more
like,
like
they find the guy at the end, and
game.
like they realise why he wanted
Yeah.
to do it, and you don't know whether, well, is he totally balmy or not? You don't really
it
never
doesn't
know. do
really
you?
look into the psychology of it that much. You do get the odd bit of inner monologue where he's kind of thinking, well, did I put enough detail in there for them to catch me? And you don't really know why he wants to be caught, partly. But
And the other thing I would have to say about it as well, it's kind of bizarrely timeless as well. Some of the others somehow kind of, reading these back kind of in order, you kind of half forget which one comes where, really. But this, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was another 10, 15 years later, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
apart from the obvious contemporary references that we just
Oh no,
like,
of
point
course,
out,
yeah, but in
there's always
terms
gonna
of
be
in
those,
terms
but-
of the plot, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely,
it does seem somehow, and it's difficult to put your finger on it, a bit of a leap forward from the previous ones, and you can see a lot of the later ones. I don't know, I think it's quite an important one, this, really.
yeah.
I see it.
I think he seems to be making fairly big strides from book to book at this point. It's like every single time, and as I say, rather than just resting on his laurels, it's like, oh, what can I do this time? And like every time, it's something that you're not expecting, and something that's really like exciting, as you say. That you could drop that in any time in the next 20 years with a couple of minor
and it wouldn't be
changes.
out of place, would it?
No, and in fact, the way they have to investigate the nature of that crime, I don't think could have changed for a long time until you get to a place or a situation where CCTV covers everything, and they just go straight to the digital. Actually, this sort of crime and the way it's set up wouldn't change at all. So maybe that's part of it.
So that'd be my.
I think there's
impressions.
a certain element of being on the cusp in terms of the 87th Precinct stories at this point, because I think after this book, the publishing arrangements change to some extent. I'll talk about that more when we talk about the next book, which is Killer's Wedge this time. Yes. But I think, at this stage, early in the series, we've had 2 lots of 3 books. Now we're on the next
What number is
step,
this?
7.
This is number 7, okay.
Yeah. And, so we're moving forward. So, we need to have a scoring moment, really.
So can you run? Are you
I'll do
able
the
to
ru-
run through
I'll do the rundown.
6 to date?
Cop Hater got 86. The Mugger got 76. The Pusher got 75. The Con Man, 83. Killer's Choice, 71. Killer's Payoff, 80. This is Police Shields, the official measurement unit of Hark, the 87th Precinct podcast. Oh, I don't know why I said it like that. I ran out of breath while I was saying the word podcast and it went all strange. I'll go first this time then. It is up the top end of these things because it's not a new style, but a good development in the style. So I'm going for a nominal 82 Police Shields out of 100. Steve-O.
Well, yeah. Well, I think I agree. I think this is a really, really good one. And I remember really enjoying this the first time round. It's got a lot of the hallmarks, what you enjoy, the pictures, not the I like the pictures. 100.
Do you like colouring them in?
No, but it's got a lot of devices here that I think will comment on and perhaps refer back to this in the future.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with it. I think it's almost a 9 out of 10, this. So I'm going to go 88.
88.
I think it's possibly my favourite to date, actually, yeah.
Excellent. Mr. Morgan Brown?
I do really love the novel as well. I think that it's a bold kind of structure. I like the countdown. I think that's fantastic. It really just winds you up as you're reading it. You just get more and more fraught as it goes along. And I understand your concerns about the plausibility of everything being done in that time. So, that might knock a couple of points off. But I'm aware of what we scored the previous novel at, and I'm also aware that Killer's Wedge is coming up. And
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a solid 80.
Ooh, solid 80. Okay, so I'm going to fire up Kenneth. Kenneth is our computer. It calculates every number nearly every time, honestly. We've got him for a short period now because this weekend he's going to be pressed into service calculating the scores for the Great North Beer Run.
Macclesfield to Liverpool.
Macclesfield to Liverpool, that's...
Via the Cheshire Line.
It's like Route 66. So, he is spitting out the number 83. So, 83 police shields this book has been awarded. So, that takes it up into the top bracket of the ones we've scored so far.
Excellent.
Yeah,
and
deservedly
so.
so.
The way I'm viewing this is, I think certain books will be able to be scored 100 because you're relative to the 87th Precinct, not all fiction. Is how I am scoring it. We should be giving
100 should be the pinnacle of the series rather than the pinnacle of all literature.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that's a whole...
Which it's going to be near the top of...
I mean, it would be nice if we finished this podcast series having organised all books into an ordered ranking system.
We've got plenty of time, so...
Yeah, that's it. As long as
You know what I mean.
SoundCloud doesn't go under and we can't host them, we'll be all right. Anyway,
I can hear you.
Oh, he's back again.
I can hear you running.
He was quiet during it, but here he is again.
Right.
He's very happy. He's very happy. It's nice. So, that was Ladykiller. We will be back with, for definite, Killer's Wedge in the next podcast. So, listen out for the bonus episode. There's some bits in that. And until then, I will have goodbyes from Morgan.
Goodbye.
From Stephen.
Goodbye.
And from me. Goodbye.